members. We've already formed a quorum, and it's also the scheduled time for starting our meeting. So I now call the meeting of the panel on financial affairs to order. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the special meeting on the 28th of January has already been distributed to you through paper 1403. Up to this moment, the Secretariat has not received any proposal for amendment. Members, any comment on the minutes? If not, I'll invite members to confirm the minutes. No objection, confirmed. Item 2 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. Ever since the last regular meeting on the 3rd of June, we received 2 papers which have already been set out on the agenda. Item 3, date of next meeting and items for discussion. On the 29th of May, Mr. Christopher Chung wrote to this panel to ask for a special meeting be convened to discuss the amendments proposed by the SFC to the professional investor regime and the client agreement requirements. The letter has already been distributed to you. And then on the 24th of May, Mr. Wai-king wrote to ask for a discussion on the regulatory issues relating to the travel insurance arising from the incident of hot air balloon in Egypt. Mr. Kwok would like to invite the Tourism Commission as well as representatives of the industry to attend. The papers have already been distributed to you. The administration has responded, and the response was included in the papers previously distributed to you for the last meeting for members' reference. So any comment? I suggest that on the suggestions of these 2 members, that is, for Mr. Chung's suggestion, we call a public hearing to allow the industry to air their views. The consultation period will last for 3 months. I hope that before the end of this session, we can call a panel meeting. Mr. Chung, you have something to say? Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just now you said that I wrote you a letter. As for the professional investor regime and the client agreement requirements, the consultation period will end on the 14th of August. The consultation document has far-reaching implications on the industry, which may be subject to huge pressure. So before our recess, I hope that we can convene a public hearing or a special meeting to allow the industry to air their views and feelings and explain issues to members. So I hope that before the recess we can have such an opportunity. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Any other comments? Before the meeting, I talked to Mr. Chung and understand his views. Mr. Abraham Sheikh, Madam Chairman, it is necessary to do this as soon as possible. Before the recess, if we can, say by the end of this month, do it, I will support you. Yes, point taken. Mr. Kwok, any supplement on your letter? Madam Chairman, in fact, before the meeting, I had a discussion with you. That's correct. So please arrange a discussion as soon as possible. When members of the public travel, they would like to know how broad the insurance coverage is. So I suggest a special meeting for these 2 issues to discuss the contents. The 16th of July at 3 p.m. up to 6 p.m. is the time slot given to me by the Secretariat. So please mark your diaries. And then on the 4th of June, Mr. Tang Ka-piu also wrote to ask for a discussion on the Octopus issue. I suggest that the letter be referred to the administration if members, and we'll see whether members are satisfied with the administration's response before following up. Mr. Kwok, you mean on the 16th of July we'll cover Mr. Chung's issue and my issue? Yes, 3.5 hours, 3 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. I will have a clash of meetings, said Mr. Kwok. We'll have Mr. Chung's topic first and then Mr. Kwok's. I asked the Secretariat to work out the details with you because we have to get a venue and work on other details. Mr. Chung, Madam Chairman, there are 8 organizations in our industry which would like to send one representative each to the meeting to do introduction and presentation. No problem. Please send the list to the Secretariat. That will be an open meeting. All interested stakeholders will be invited. So just pass the list to the Secretariat, which will issue invitations. All right? So much for items of discussion for the next meeting. Items 4 on the agenda, proposed establishment of an independent insurance authority. Since these are legislative proposals, other members are also invited to attend to this meeting. Please invite the officials to come in. Paper 1387-01 has been submitted by the administration, and tabled is also a briefing. Today, we've also asked the clerk to table a letter from the Hong Kong Federation of Insurers. The letter should have been tabled. That letter is directly related to the issue to be discussed now. So that letter was distributed to you. All right. If the administration is ready, I'll invite its representative to do a presentation. Good morning, Madam Chairman and members. In relation to the setting up of an independent insurance authority, the IIA, we've just completed a very important stage. I'd like to take today's opportunity to explain to you the legislative proposals on the establishment of an IIA. We had in-depth consultation with the public and the industry to listen to their views. So today I'll brief you on our conclusions. Perhaps I should defer to Mr. Chang. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to use about 10 minutes to do a briefing and leave more time for members to discuss and ask questions. First of all, I'll give you some background. In fact, in July 2010, we started consultation on the establishment of an IIA. The general feedback is that people are in support of the idea. And in June 2011, we announced the consultation conclusions and further consulted the industry. At the request of the industry, in October last year, we carried out a public consultation. And today we would like to report to you the consultation conclusions in the hope that by the end of 2013, we'll be able to introduce the enabling bill to the LegCo for the establishment of the IIA in 2015. Industry overview. Hong Kong has 154 insurance companies. In Asia and the world, this is very intensive. The contribution of insurance business to the GDP of Hong Kong has been around 3% in the past 3 years. Gross premium in 2012 around $300 billion, 13% increase from 2011. The average annual growth is 5.3% in the past 5 years. For in-force long-term insurance policies, they're up to over 10 million. So, to adopt a conservative view, we have millions of insurance policies. According to the most updated figures in May 2013, around 76,000 insured will have individual agents and agencies, as well as insurance brokers, altogether 70,000 people. Now, purpose of establishing an IIA would like to modernize the insurance industry regulatory infrastructure to protect policyholders and to align with international practice that financial regulators should be financially and operationally independent of the government. Upon the completion of the consultation exercise, we received 558 submissions, of which 503 are copies of 3 templates of standard petitions. So we received in total 58 submissions, 32 from the industry, and then also 9 from other bodies and organizations, and 17 from the public and other stakeholders. For the legislative proposals, they cover the governance and funding mechanism, the licensing regime for insurance intermediaries to replace the self-disciplinary regime, the powers of the IIA, and conduct requirements. Views received led to modifications of our original proposals. We had to balance interests of various stakeholders. First of all, we have to protect the interest of policyholders. We would like to facilitate market innovation, improve business environment, and promote the development of the industry. We should also cope with the development of the market. And of course, we would like to have a smooth and stable transition. Now, I'd like to report to you the salient conclusions of the consultation exercise. We have 47 pages in the annex to the paper, which sets out all the details. First of all, governing board, for its composition, at first, we propose not more than 2 directors with knowledge of and experience in the insurance industry. And we would like to cover life insurance and non-life insurance. And there will be a number of levies and license fees and service fees. We would like to build in checks and balances, including an appeal mechanism, monitoring by the LegCo, etc. We would like to have more industry participation in the governing board and the IACs, that is, industry advisory committees. The IIA should independently enforce the law. And there were diverse views on whether the levy should be paid by insurers or policyholders. Our response is as follows. We'll amend our proposals. The governing board should comprise at least 2 directors from the industry, and it will be expressly provided that the IACs will cover insurance and insurance intermediaries.
That's it.
When it comes to the funding mechanism, we think the insurance authority should have stable and diversified source of income, so we will keep the original proposal. We mirror the existing registration categories of the 3 self-regulatory organizations. There are 5 groups, and I'm not going to go into details. There is also selling of insurance products and also after-sales services. There will be definition of regulated activities proposed, and there will be a 3-year transitional period. The license fees will be waived for 5 years. The views of respondents, they in general support our proposals. And they said there are some suggestions as to the definition of regulated activities and also exemption provisions. We think that at this stage we don't propose to introduce any changes because this will cause confusion. The current arrangement is that for those who have been already registered, they will smoothly move on to the new regime. And after the 3-year period, the IIA may review the categorization. And in relation to provisions, we will further clarify with the DOJ as to exemptions. Power of the IIA. Well, they have power of inspection and power of investigation, just like any other regulators. And they can also delegate powers of inspection and investigation to the Hong Kong Monetary Authority for regulation of banks' activities. Well, there is a stopgap measure, that is, the license will be temporarily suspended. In other words, it means that if it is a complicated case and it will be some time before a decision is made, then we will, in order to protect public interest, suspend the license of the insurance intermediary. But some people think that such a mechanism is procedurally unfair, because the organization is presumed innocent until otherwise proven. And there are also concerns about the power of the IIA being too great. And there are also views saying that the regulation of bank and non-bank insurance intermediaries should be consistent. After considering the views, we will not introduce the temporary suspension power, but we think that the power of regulation of the IIA is sufficient and suitable. But there is an appellate mechanism, and there are also checks and balances. We will set down principles of conduct requirements, including the requirement of acting in the best interest of policyholders. Details will be set down in subsidiary legislation and guidelines issued by the IIA. In relation to corporate licensees and insurers, we would require them to appoint a responsible officer to ensure internal control system and procedures are in place so that all these requirements will be complied with. The IIA can impose disciplinary sanctions, including reprimand, fine, suspension or revocation of license, and prohibition of license application in a specific period on insurance intermediaries. Disciplinary decisions will be subject to safeguards, including the possible reviews by the Insurance Appeals Tribunal. Responses. Well, they think that the requirement of acting in the best interest of policyholders may put them in a very difficult position in relation to contract obligations, because according to their employment contract, they should act in the best interest of insurers. And they also think that it is too onerous to require them to use their best endeavors to fulfill their responsibilities. CEOs of insurers should be allowed to delegate the duties of ROs to other senior executives. And they think the upper limit of fine is too high, that is $10 million. We know that since the financial tsunami in 2008, the principle of acting in a client's best interest has been endorsed internationally. And in November 2012, when the MPF intermediary regulatory regime was put in place, this requirement was set down, so we do not propose to change it. But with regard to the concern of insurance agents, well, the law supersedes contract terms. So the insurer cannot say that by acting in the client's best interest you have contravened the contract term. We'll respond to the concern of the industry in relation to best endeavor. Well, when it comes to reasonable endeavor, it is not too onerous. There is a standard of best endeavors in MPF regulatory regime. We think that for the regulatory regime of insurance agents, the standard should not be lower. We want to have an adequate deterrent effect for the fine. The law says that the IIA will publish guidelines on it may impose a penalty. And of course, the level of penalty will depend on the severity of the misconduct, and it will not put the licensee into financial jeopardy. Well, these are the salient points we've received from the consultation. We plan to introduce the bill at the end of this year, and in 2015 to set up the IIA. And in the meantime, we will continue to talk to stakeholders, including insurance practitioners. This is the annual presentation. Thank you. We have 4 members who would like to speak: Jeffrey Lam, Wai-king, Ting Ka-piu, Albert Ho, and Kenneth Leung, and the Deputy Chairman, and also James Toh. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. After the consultation, the administration has revised their proposals, say for example, to withdraw the temporary suspension of license. I mean the power to suspend the license of the insurance agent. They've withdrawn that, and it is accepted by the industry because it will avoid penalizing the insurance agent before a decision is made. And they've decided to keep the maximum penalty of $10 million. The industry said to me that they'd like to know whether it can be separated, that is, to separate the intermediary from the insurer, because the burden on the intermediary may be too high. And in March, the appeal tribunal said that last year they received 479 cases, which is an increase of 18% from 2011. When it comes to claims, they are bogged down by details. And it's said that they try to use the fine prints on small details to avoid paying compensation. So will there be adjustments in relation to this? If there can be some guidelines, say for example guidelines to compensation, I think disputes will be better dealt with. Who is to take this? P.S. We've received a lot of views in the consultation in relation to the design of the penalty. The industry, as I said, include different service providers. So in the design of sanctions and penalties, we have to bear in mind deterrent effect and reasonableness. Say, for example, insurers. Some of them are multinational organizations with a turnover of over $10 billion. So if the maximum fine is too low, then it will not have any deterrent effect. Yes, there are some individual insurance agents who are not earning much, but there are some who earn a lot. But for the individual insurance agents, it will be difficult to set down two tiers of penalties. We've drawn reference from other financial regulators in this regard. They have set down an upper limit, but there is a guideline when it comes to tariff. They take into account a number of factors, including the severity of the misconduct, whether there is sufficient deterrent effect, and, most important of all, the financial soundness of the person involved and whether it is a repeated offense. Of course, we don't want to put the party into financial jeopardy as a result of the penalty. And in relation to these financial regulators, they have abundant cases and experience to give us sufficient reference value. Mr. Wai-king, I'm not a member of this panel, but I've heard from the industry. That's why I attend this meeting. Thank you for letting me speak. I have 3 questions. First, the governing board. Representative of practitioners. What is in relation to the proportion? Out of the at least 8 members, apart from the chairman and the deputy chairman, 6 members are non-executive directors. Out of the 6, 2 of them are from the industry. So in theory, they are from the industry or will have relevant knowledge. So it's about 1/3. But there is no maximum number of members in the board. So there may be more members. So will you keep that proportion of 1/3 to keep the voice of the industry from being diluted? That's my first question. Second question, also about the governing board. There is a requirement that the 2 representatives from the trade only needs experience in the insurance industry or relevant knowledge. But that is too vague. And there may be actuaries, accountants, there who might have a knowledge of the insurance industry. So if there are such people in the board, then insurance practitioners will not be able to join. And we've heard from staff unions that they would like to get a representative in the board. In the board, there should be intermediaries, insurers, and very often they represent large companies or employers of SMEs. But there is no role to play by practitioners. We would like to get members of a labor union from into the board. And we also welcome the proposal that people from the industry will be able to join the expert panel. PAS. We're not talking about an industry organization. We're talking about a regulator with enforcement power. So we have to be very careful in the composition of the governing board. It should be broadly representative, covering various sectors with expertise in various matters, which in turn will help the enforcement of the legislation by the authority. We're aware of certain certain demands that insurers, practitioners, agents, representatives of labor unions, non-life insurance, life insurance. There are many different things. So from what I've heard, the most important thing is for the governing board to communicate with the industry. It's not just about whether there is someone from your group in the governing board, because the governing board can't possibly cover all the different areas. The most important thing is for the governing board to communicate on a formal setting, non-formal setting, regularly or non-regular communications, and that is already built in our design. Some people also said that there should not be anyone from the industry in the board. Otherwise, the decision of the decision of the board may be influenced unduly.
So during the second phase of consultation, we fine-tuned the proposals. No ceiling would be set. We have to ensure that we have the professionals and talents in the board in the hope that we'll have flexibility. Well, just now the Permanent Secretary, well, Mr. Kwok, would you please queue up for a second round? Industry members have repeatedly expressed that view. Mr. Wong Teng Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Society has advanced. The awareness of the importance of taking out insurance has been growing. I believe the proposals here will benefit the policy holders, and the proposals will be conducive to the development of the industry. Now, the proposal is to do away with the temporary suspension mechanism. In the interim, if an insurance firm or an industry member repeats a mistake, what should happen? And then in future, in relation to the division of work between the SFC and the IIA, I'm very concerned. I mean the Hong Kong MA. Recently, for members of the banking industry who are involved in insurance matters, the Hong Kong MA handed down punishment. And at the end of last month, the guidelines issued to banks took effect. The guidelines require banks to disclose commission in all transactions. So the Hong Kong MA has expressed its concern again about one industry being put under two regulatory authorities. In accordance with the proposals here, the Hong Kong MA will also be engaged in inspection, investigation, and discipline. So, still there will be two regulatory authorities for one industry. Should we not ask the administration to explain more clearly this phenomenon and the thoughts of the administration so as to set the minds of the industry at ease? Permanent Secretary, I'd like to thank Mr. Wong for his questions. Well, briefly, I'll respond to the first question first. For the temporary suspension power, during the consultation period, we came to know from the industry and the market that some stakeholders may have to leave before the investigation is completed. Well, if the principal or the RO wants to enhance the compliance procedures, to appoint agents, to study whether or not there are sufficient resources to train them, then preparation work has to be done better. As regards punishment, that is something to do with the deterring effect, so we have to be stricter. More importantly, investor education is important, and the government, the market, and the industry will have to be involved, and we have to work harder. So we would like to do more in terms of education and deterrent effect. As for the regulation of insurance business in banks and in insurance companies, when we have an IIA in future, then we won't have regulatory requirements formulated by various regulators. There will be one regulator. And then in future, whether or not an employee works in a bank or not, he has to take out a license under the IIA. The bank, as an enterprise, has to be overseen by the Hong Kong MA, in particular whether or not a bank is operating stably. So this is to do away with duplication of regulatory effort, because the whole bank can be regulated. And if industry members sell products not in compliance with the rules and regulations, then the Hong Kong MA may be more effective and efficient in detecting such irregularities. So there will be a standardized appeal mechanism. Mr. Albert Ho, thank you, Madam Chairman. As for the IIA proposed here, I understand that it will be put on a par with the SFC on many aspects. Am I correct? As far as I know, the SFC does not have any temporary suspension power. Why is it that suddenly we have this power with the IIA? The two authorities are so similar, but one has this power, one does not. People will criticize you. My feeling is that the SFC does not have this power. And then for collaboration, one industry is put under two regulators. It's just like the Hong Kong MA and the SFC. For insurance products, very often the insurance component is very small. The investment proportion is very big. For this IIA, in future, will it collaborate with the SFC? Should insurance companies' products not be regulated by the SFC as well? A product should not just because it is issued by an insurance company and carries a small component of insurance will only be viewed as an insurance product, because very often it's not the case. Permanent Secretary, Madam Chairman, when we first designed this new regulatory regime, we did make reference to other financial and monetary regulatory authorities. Last year, we have statutory regimes enacted for intermediaries and under the MPF schemes. Of course, the MPF schemes are very much put under the regulation of the SFC. Mr. Ho was correct. Under the SFO, the SFC does not have this temporary suspension power. Therefore, after considering views from different sectors of the community, we decided that we should not continue to pursue this temporary suspension power. As for products, yes, members of the public and legislators did receive complaints, and we also received complaints to the effect that products might only carry 1 to 3% of insurance. The remaining portion is investment. Such products are put under the SFC. Publicity materials have to be vetted by the SFC. Mr. Ho mentioned banks and insurance companies offering such products. We've done more in terms of disclosure. By disclosure arrangements, we would like to enhance protection for the investors. Madam Chairman, my question is very simple. For industry members selling such products, are they trained? They're not holding that license. They may not have the knowledge, so I'm worried. If there's not enough time, I can await the answer later. From 2009, that is since the financial tsunami, under the encouragement of the administration, a number of measures have been put in. For example, in terms of training for industry members, we do require them to sit for other examinations. There will be a cooling period of 2 weeks. During the cooling period, the relevant insurance company has to make telephone inquiries of the customer as an after-service effort to make sure that the customer understands the product. So a lot of measures have been adopted, and those are improvements. Next, Mr. Kenneth Leung. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Albert Ho's question. Under the new regulatory regime, will that authority has a backup vetting power on products? Of course, I understand that Mr. Albert Ho was asking about investment-linked products. Then the SFC will have a vetting power. In recent years, investment products have been and insurance products have been more and more complicated, including investment-linked products. On page 15 of the paper, in relation to disciplinary measure for the disciplinary body, will it become another statutory body? And the last point of slide 15 says that disciplinary decisions by the IIA will be subject to safeguards, including possible review by the Independent Insurance Appeals Tribunal, the IAT. Is the IAT an existing mechanism or a new mechanism? Permanent Secretary? Madam Chairman, I'll answer the last question first because that has something to do with check and balance. This IAT is something like a judicial organ. However, it is different from ordinary courts. It will specialize in appeals on the punishment handed down by the IIA. Resources will be very focused. Only experts will sit on the tribunal. The listing time won't be too long. And we hope that the experts will be able to accumulate knowledge and experience during the course of action. And we've made reference to other regulatory bodies like the SFC, the Hong Kong MA, and the MPFA, and their appeal mechanisms. A High Court judge will preside at an appeal, accompanied by 2 industry members. So the judge will be able to absorb the knowledge and expertise of the industry. So that's the appeal mechanism that we're proposing. And just now I said that we're inclined to empower the SFC to vet insurance products. We did refer to overseas experience and international practice. Between the insurance company and the customers, there is this policy as an agreement. So such companies will design different products for different customers. Does the SFC need expert knowledge to vet such products? At the moment, we don't think that's necessary. But for disclosure, I believe the future IIA will communicate with the industry in that regard, and guidelines may be published every now and then. For investors and ordinary consumers, when they buy products, through disclosure arrangements, they'll be able to master the features of a particular product to see whether it suits himself or his company. Next, Mr. James Toh. Thank you, Madam Chairman. In future, if there are gray areas under which the Hong Kong MA or the SFC is empowered to handle or regulate, well, if there are such gray areas, then I'm not inclined to give that power to the IIA. You say that the IIA is a latter regulatory regime, or the IA. I'm not that confident in the IA. Relatively speaking, the Hong Kong MA and SFC, I have more confidence in them. You may say that as a new regulatory body, after accumulating experience, it may also gain confidence. Sorry, I'm not that confident. And then colleagues are very concerned about products with only a very small element of insurance, but a big element of investment. If anything is to explode, so to speak, that may only take place decades from now. For Lehman Brothers, mini bonds, the whole situation may blow up in just a few years. So the IIA has to be very strict in regulation. And members said that a fine of $10 million was too high. In my opinion, we have to maintain that high level of penalty.
If you're a head of a large insurer, you receive millions or tens of millions as bonus. And if you engage in some very unreasonable practice, and with the implied consent, explicit consent, connivance by the company, you are able to engage such practices to increase your sales volume. And if there is insufficient penalty to deal with very serious cases, where if you're talking about small intermediaries, then the court will understand. If you undermine the deterrent effect by lowering the penalty, that is unacceptable to me. Some people from the industry said that they are required to disclose the commission they share. But for the same product, if you work in a bank, you don't have to make such a disclosure. They do mind about that, and I think their concern is reasonable. I hope that I will hear some responses from them. PAS, any short reply? Well, I am happy to hear from Mr. Toh that he supports the maintenance of the upper limit. There was the temporary suspension of license, but it was withdrawn. And we have a sound financial services sector here. We have to be as user-friendly as possible. So communication with financial regulators is very important. And as to the responsibility or the division of labor, well, of course, communication is the most important. Mr. Tang Ka-piu. The Federation of Insurers has given you a written submission. I hope that you will reply to their submission and you will communicate with them and take into account their views before you finalize your bill. And hopefully you will use the time before November when you introduce the bill to enhance communications with the industry and the Federation. We thank you for your revisions. And I do think there is a need to continue communication. Let me now go on to the details. First, proportion of composition. Now you relaxed it to 2, but the industry is still concerned that there should be a percentage. Say 25% of members of the board should be from the industry. They are concerned about the composition and representativeness being diluted. I think it's something to do with mutual trust. Please continue. Please consider a percentage, say for example 25% or 1/4. Is it reasonable? You will consider it. And the responsibility or obligations of the CEO. Now, a responsible officer can be appointed, but it seems that both the CEO and the responsible officer will have to be put in place. You put in place an RO to ensure that there is at least one person responsible for management. But the person is not to be held responsible for what the intermediaries have done. They have to put in place an internal control system. You have to make it clear explicitly so that it will allay the concern of the industry. And you also said that the power of supervision can be delegated into the RO, but both of them will be held responsible. The reason why it can be delegated to an RO is that there will be someone dedicated to do that. But the CEO is already responsible for many different things. So you should put in place measures to encourage CEOs to appoint ROs to supervise the work of intermediaries. In relation to the upper limit of fine, $10 million. Yes, if there are guidelines on tariff, it will be helpful. But what about in cases when you will suspend the license of the intermediary, and on top of that, you impose a fine on him? He's already lost his job. So you have to consider whether it will put that person into financial jeopardy. PAS, I can undertake that we have maintained close communication, only closer and closer communication with the industry. Looking forward, there will be a preparatory committee with the industry to ensure smooth transition of the over 100 insurance companies. And of course, this is something that we will definitely do. And as to whether we insist that the CEO of the insurer should be the RO responsible officer. Well, it is in relation to something material. The person has to make sure that there is an effective internal control for compliance. As a CEO, he has the power to deploy resources. For an effective control system to be put in place, that person needs to have the power to deploy resources for training, for appointment, to ensure that due diligence is exercised. So we propose to keep our original proposal. Under existing legislation, as far as I know, in the enforcement of law, the Office of the Commissioner of Insurance requires CEOs to fulfill that duty. So it is unreasonable for us to lower the requirement of a CEO after the IRA is set up. Mr. Ibrahim Sheikh, I support the paper and the setting up of the IIA. Mr. Albert Ho asked a question. Well, we'll have to learn something from the Lehman Brothers incident. It's taken 4 years. You see that this product and the regulators are problematic. Most of the product is investment. But what if there is a small element of insurance, and if you allow someone who is not familiar with the product to sell it, so is it going to be supervised by SFC, SRO, or you see, the control on supervision of insurance insurance agents are very good because there is only one regulator, but not the case for financial products because there are 2 regulators. So if you allow the same thing to happen, then there will be a repeat of Lehman Brothers. You need to learn from history. The report of Lehman Brothers have set it out very clearly. PAS. Yes. What is the current regulation of insurance product with investment? Yes, for insurance come investment product. Yes, caution has to be exercised. Under the SFO, such products are classified as collective investment schemes. They make offer to the public, and they require prior approval from the SFC. So no matter how the regime is changed, in relation to such product, is only one regulator, and that is the SFC. Thank you for the explanation. Yes, I understand. Well, but for the seller, for the salesperson, you remember, people in banks, the frontline staff don't know their products. They don't know what the product they are selling. That is a fundamental issue, and that's why all people simply believe what they're told. I do hope that it will be made clear in the legislation. PAS. We'll have to enhance supervision of conduct. The regime will be changed from a self-regulatory one to one done by an authority, so the effectiveness will be improved. And of course, there is also investor education. No matter how much we improve the regulatory regime, we still need investor education. You may know that at the end of last year, the SFC formally put in place the Investor Education Center. The first task they have to do is to educate the public in relation to such products. The Federation of Insurers have written to us, and I have contacted them previously. They mention about experience. There may be many people who meet this condition. Would you consider narrowing down the scope so that someone will have rich experience in insurance, in the insurance industry? Only those people can be appointed in the board. And in relation to the function, yes, regulation and consumer protection is important, but can the authority help the industry in the development of market or remove barriers? Will these be included in the function of the authority? And in relation to best interest, I know that the administration has responded to that. Can you undertake that there will be a guideline setting out information about what is best interest and what is not. Of course, for insurance agents, the company requires them to act in the best interest of the insurer. But at the same time, consumers expect agents to act in their best interest. So it seems that wherever there are disputes, there is a sort of Damocles on top of their heads. And in relation to the $10 million, just now, in reply to members' questions, PAS, you said that it has to have a deterrent effect. I remain unconvinced. For a large company, $10 million is not a big deterrence. But for practitioners, it is a huge sum. So does it mean that it is a deterrent, an effective deterrent? As far as I understand, for small agents, not senior ones, those with an experience of 2 or 3 years, or those who have newly joined, they only have about $200,000 a year. So you make a profit of $10,000 or $20,000 for each policy, and they are subject to a fine of $10 million. Then it is a huge concern to them, and it will be a barrier for the industry to find new entrants. The Federation made a suggestion. Can it be a certain percentage or certain time, say 2 or 3 times, X times the value of the insurance of the policy? Just now you mentioned the function of the IIA. In a consultation, we have considered how to ensure that in the design of new regulatory regime, the regulator will keep in mind ease of compliance. Of course, when you set down a regime, it will have to be compliable. So in the function, we've included that the authority will have to promote the competitiveness of the industry. That will be the general direction. With regard to disciplinary sanction, in financial regulation there are different types of sanctions. We don't want an across-the-board approach. We want it to be proportionate to the severity of the conduct.
That will include reprimand, penalty, revocation of license, suspension of license, etc. The chairman was correct. To certain companies, $10 million may not mean much, but that will be a huge impact on their reputation. And even for public reprimand, the company concerned will appeal to the end because that has something to do with its reputation. So in accordance with the prevailing background, we would like to send a message to the market that non-compliance practices won't be acceptable to the public. Well, just now I suggest that you increase the penalty in relation to the severity of the irregularity. As I said, the punishment must be commensurate with the severity of the irregularity. We also have to consider the financial ability of the company, like the scale of operation, the size of the company, etc. I believe in future the regulatory authority will consider such factors in meting out punishment. To allay the industry's worries, we'll ask the future IIA to formulate relevant guidelines before enforcing the law. As for the best interest issue mentioned by the chairman, for the industry members, the future IIA should publish codes or guidelines with examples to allow industry members to understand what's meant by acting in the client's best interest. Next, Mr. Christopher Chung. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just now I heard that in future the IIA will have an appellate mechanism. For this appellate mechanism, can we apply the practice of the SFC or the model of the SFC? Permanent Secretary, in fact, we made reference to the provisions on the appeal mechanism under the SFC. In the middle of last year, the LegCo scrutinized the intermediary mechanism under the MPFA, something similar. Well, as for the SFC, I think we can discuss that in future also, Mr. Chang, right? 5 members would like to ask questions for a second round. Any members not to ask questions under round 1 or any more for round 2? Then I'll draw a line there. 2 minutes, all right? I'll strictly adhere to this timing. Mr. Kwok, Wai-king, when the Permanent Secretary answered my questions in the first round just now, she said that the IIA will be an independent body, is not an industry organization. That remark is not appealing to the ear. No matter what regulation you're talking about, the authority will be directly related to the industry. It's impossible not to have member representatives from the industry. They would like to air their views. In fact, under the existing IA, only a third of its members, or a quarter of the members of the board, are from the industry. But that's really ineffective because they're not the majority. For us, we deem it okay just to keep the 1/3. I don't understand why the Permanent Secretary dislikes the industry members, so to speak. For those with knowledge or experience in the insurance industry, like retirees, lawyers, accountants, actuaries, etc., will they neglect the SMEs and the independent industry members and their interests? As for the retirees, they may still have income. Are they really working in the industry? Those who are actually working in this industry, they're not represented. You say it's an independent body, but these people are not represented. I think we should allow everybody and the whole board to understand the difficulties of the industry members. We have to enhance competitiveness and promote development of the industry. How difficult it is to just add 1 more seat for the industry members, the employees. For a financial regulator, the board has to be very serious in enforcing the law. For serious irregularities, they may go to the board, or serious misconduct. The financial position of an insurance company is very important. We have to ensure that an insurance company won't be in dereliction of duty or collapse. And there may be disclosure of confidential information. When we talk to the industry members, they also had reservation. Do they really want to know the financial position of their counterparts? We would like to have impartial law enforcement, so we have to be very careful with board membership. Given that pretext, I suggested just now that this is not an industry organization, but a law enforcer. That said, we believe that the regulator and the industry must keep in close communication because the industry is on the front line. They have to know the latest market situation, latest products, and to what extremes can practices be. And such communication should go through the board, because you're subject to a lot of constraints and confidentiality as well as conflicts of interest when you enforce the law. A lot of factors may tie your hands. So under the IIA, there will be 2 industry advisory committees. 2, because we understand that the interest of the life insurance products and non-life insurance products are very different. we may not be able to strike a balance. Of course, we can go back and consider your views. Well, I think they have to listen to members' views as well as the insurance industry's views. I'd like to update our colleagues that after the Lehman Brothers incident, in terms of vetting of products and sales practices, there have already been major changes. It's no longer what members knew in the past. In particular, I'd like to clarify that for product regulation, bid funds or investment-linked products, they're vetted by the SFC. The requirements are the same. The time may be long, maybe 6 months or 9 months or even a year. The vetting has not been concluded. That has seriously undermined Hong Kong's reputation as an international financial center in terms of flexibility. Features, risks, sold by banks or not, or by insurance companies, the regulation is the same. As for sales practices, they've also undergone major changes after the LB incident. The banks actually record conversations. And starting from July, insurance companies have to make recordings as well. Sometimes transactions are done outside the offices and recording may not be possible. But then later, another person, another staff member will telephone the customer to talk about product features, premium, consequences of premature termination, etc., etc. And if the customer decides not to take the product, he can get back his money. And of course, if there's any difference in investment return, then the difference can be collected by the company. So don't get it wrong. The salespersons are in great difficulty. For two regulators, for one industry, we understand that in a certain case, the IA handed down punishment and later the SFC did the same. So this is also the concern of the industry. In future, the IIA and the Hong Kong MA have to closely cooperate with each other. In terms of operation information, the Hong Kong MA gets most. And sometimes cases have to be referred to the IIA. As I said, IIA will be responsible for frontline. Frontline inspection and will be carried out by the Hong Kong MA, but licensing will be done by the IIA. So there won't be double punishment. At present, the self-disciplinary regulatory regime also takes out self-disciplinary punishment. So in future, there will be improvement. Next, Mr. Alberto, I'd like to thank the Deputy Chairman for updating us on the latest situation. I wonder whether everything has already been completed or certain tasks are still underway. I hope that in future we get an updated paper on how much has been done. Well, if industry employees have to take out a license from the SFC, right? Because most products come under the SFC. So you have to be familiar with the code, suitability, etc. Should that be the case? Deputy Chairman, according to what I know, that's not the case. Insurance brokers don't know so much knowledge and they may not have a license under SFC. Is that the case? For products with a huge element of investment, do they need to take out a license under the SFC? Not at the moment, but when the IIA is set up, there will be improvements. At present, there are 3 regulators with different regulatory regimes. For people selling products at the moment, under the new regulatory regime, they will be regulated. So look ahead. Well, let the Permanent Secretary finish first. We heard a lot of voices in relation to conduct regulation. Should it be an investment product-based regulatory regime or a non-insurance product-based regime? But that should not stand in the way of the establishment of the IIA. For the setup of the IIA, we can move from the existing regime to the future licensing regime. Given future market developments, I don't rule out the possibility of further developments. Mr. Albert Ho, you worked so hard, but at the end of the day, you see a very big loophole. As an investment product, yes, you vet it, there's disclosure, there are recordings, but the purchasers or the salespersons don't know the knowledge and details. They're not to be licensed. I have some supplementary information here. Investment-linked products come under separate paper. To a certain extent, I agree with Mr. Albert Ho that the industry also strives for a licensing regime under SFC. Last year, they suddenly terminated the licensing regime. We asked them back for licenses. In future, whether it will be the SFC or the IIA issuing licenses, we should discuss that. But somebody must issue licenses. After the transition, the Hong Kong MA can introduce a new licensing regime. Mr. James Doe, for ELAS, if you say that in future the IIA will be responsible for regulation, sorry, I don't trust it. I said this right from the very beginning. And then for approved products, they are approved, but they may not be suitable to the customers. I have a member in the family who might want to claim medical insurance, etc., etc., and the salespersons can sell all sorts of products to him, and he may take all products on. That's my worry. If frontline tellers of banks promote, say, LB products to the customers may be committed for 20 years. Of course, the customer can pay a one-off premium to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Acting in the client's best interest. If that is in conflict with the company's best interest, it will be very serious. Why should it be in the client's best interest? Then the agents and brokers can reject unreasonable requests from companies. And salespersons don't have to sacrifice the interest of clients. If there's no conflict, no problem. But if there is a conflict, the client should be protected. Otherwise, members of the public cannot be protected. If the CEO wants the agent or broker to sacrifice the client's interest, it should be punished, say to the tune of $10 million, because the customer may go into great trouble in 10 or 20 years' time.
Yes, information vetting is very important. Yes, we may consider implementing the licensing regime. Well, the industry would like to know more. The composition of the disciplinary board under the IIA, are there any members from the industry? Not even one with knowledge of the industry. If there is none, then there is no one who knows the operation of the industry in the disciplinary committee. Isn't it a flaw? And you mentioned a good proposal that you will set up a preparatory committee to maintain close communication with the industry. Well, you already have very good communication with the industry, but I still like to know when the committee would be set up. This is a crucial time. It's just before drafting. So will you set up the committee now to start communication with the industry as soon as possible to ensure smooth operation of drafting and introduction? Well, actually, we've started drafting of the bill, and we respect the views of the industry. That's why we have set out all the proposals, and we've done that. We've almost completed all the provisions. It's high time for us to set up a preparatory committee. And it may not necessarily speed up the process, but it's necessary. And we will focus on transition. It involves about 70,000 practitioners, and they would like, of course, we would let them know what they need to know for the beginning period, that there is no need for them to make applications, and then they will continue, they will be able to move on to the new regime. And also the transition of the three self-regulatory organizations to IIA. In relation to disciplinary committee, we've drawn reference of independent financial regulators, including the MPFA and the SFC, the disciplinary procedures under them. But we've added one element. We will set up an expert panel, providing expert advice. There may be new products every month. Sometimes information is needed from the industry. Say, for example, other possible considerations that needs to be taken into account when they decide whether a practitioner has breached the rules and regulations. Well, we finished with this item, Mr. Kwok. I'd like to get some information through you. We know that the Office of the Commissioner Insurance, some of them are civil servants. They will not be automatically transferred to IIA. They will have to apply for a job again. So for these civil servants, are there any voluntary scheme for them to leave their post? Will there be severance pay or whatever? Well, my friend reminds me. Well, I have to declare that I am a member from the insurance sector. Well, I am a member of the advisory committee related to insurance. So can I get the information? That's the end of the discussion. The PAS has already undertaken that the administration will reply directly to the Federation. Please give us a copy. And just now you say that a preparatory committee will be set up. Please let us know after it's set up so that both us and the sector will know that issues can be ironed out through the preparatory committee. Will you supply the information requested by the member? Yes. That's the end of this item. We move on to the next item. Thank you. The next item, regulation of collective investment schemes. Let's welcome the administration. There is already a paper, CB bracket 11401 stroke 12 to 13 bracket 04. I'll first ask the administration to introduce the paper, and then I will open the floor for members to ask questions. Who is to take us through the paper? Ms. Zhang? Please be brief so that we have more time for members to ask questions. Thank you. We received a letter from the Secretariat on the 5th of June that the panel would like to get more information in relation to the sales of hotel rooms, more information about regulation of collective investment schemes. First, the role and powers of the SFC, and two, when we were made aware of the sale of Apex Horizon, that it may be subject to the regulation of the SFC because it is a CSI, collective investment scheme, and whether we have put in place regulatory measures in relation to similar schemes like the Apex Horizon. The SFC is a section under the SFC is conducting investigation into Apex Horizon, so it's inappropriate for us to comment on this case. And according to our usual practice, we cannot comment on individual cases. But I'd like to take the opportunity to help members to better understand how we regulate collective investment scheme. And I will call the collective investment scheme CIS, and for the Securities and Futures Ordinance, I call it SFO. Definition of CIS under SFO. You'll find the detailed information in the paper. In short, CIS is an investment product of a collective nature. Most familiar CIS are funds. Say, for example, REITs. In order to be a CIF, there has to be 4 elements. First, it must involve an arrangement in respect of property. Participants. 2. Participants do not have day-to-day control over the management of the property. Number 3. The property is managed by a third party to make arrangements for the management. The contributions of participants will be pooled. And the last one, the purpose of the CIS2, through management of the third party, generate profits. Under the SFO, the definition of CIS is quite wide. This is because at the time when SFO was introduced, the SFO and the LegCo, after elaborate discussion, would like to introduce a definition that is quite wide to provide reasonable consumer protection. If the definition is too narrow, it may not be able to cover new products as the market changes. The definition of CIS at that time has strong reference from local legislations and also definitions of the US and the UK. Regulation of CIS still is in line with overseas financial centers that practice common law. Say, for example, Singapore, UK, and Australia. Because of the unique feature of CIS, key features and key risks have to be set out in the information in the offer document. The CIS must also meet appropriate structural requirements. Well, the property is managed by a third party, so the qualification and experience of the third party is very important. We have regulation over that. And the property is entrusted to a third party. Ownership and management are separated to afford protection of the investment. There is a wide framework under the SFO because it's based on a policy objective. Say, for example, if an individual investor purchases a commercial premises for rental, then it is not subject to the regulation of SFO. But if the investor through a CIS made an investment on the premises, then it will be regulated by the SFO. What is the difference between the two? The direct purchase means the purchaser has whole ownership and full whole ownership and management of the premises. The person can decide to whom the premises is to be leased to and for how much. When it comes to CIS, then the investor will have to make choices, because part of the management will have to be transferred to a third party, and the third party will charge a fee. The third party will pool the contributions of the many investors together. So there needs to be some kind of consumer protection. You will find the authorization flow chart of CIS in the document. We may impose a special authorization condition in relation to an individual product. And we may also reject an authorization. So we've set out the general information of CIS in the paper, and we hope that we will be able to help members better understand the scheme. 4 members would like to speak. 3 minutes. James Toll. On behalf of 20-odd investors of the Apex Horizon, asked the following questions. On the 13th of May, the SFC made a statement, so that is in the public domain. My question is, the SFC may have a different view on law from Cheung Kong Holdings. The SFC thinks that there is no authorization from the SFC in relation to the sales of Apex Horizon, but that authorization is required. But there is an agreement reached. If Cheung Kong Holdings agrees to rescind the transaction, well, in essence, the property will be bought back at original cost plus no loss guarantee and legal fees. Then under the law, the SFC will take that into consideration in considering future prosecution. So I think the issue is whether the property is to be bought back at original price. If the agreement is rescinded, original price and market price are different concepts. If the price has risen by 8 to 15% through a confirmed sale, then if it is bought back at the original price and the agreement is rescinded, then it's taken as if nothing happened.
The purchasers are of the opinion that the properties have already risen in price. So why shouldn't the market price be the fairest price? The SFC puts it in black and white what things should be. So why is it not market price for buying back? Mrs. Lam? Well, we have to look at the CIS itself. That is the CIS framework. Under Section 103, this particular scheme does not have our approval or authorization, so the property cannot be sold. So things have to be reverted to the original position when there's no purchase. So there's no question of whether or not the prices have dropped or risen. The investors may have paid a deposit and other fees and charges. All these have to be returned to the investors. As for the costs incurred by the investors, there should also be a compensation. We are now obtaining information from third parties to monitor the latest situation of the cancellation of contracts. And for Pearl Wisdom, that is on the Cheung Kong side, did it adopt all the procedures to our satisfaction. So, Chairman, we're doing that at the moment. That's not Mr. To's question. He asked why you asked for an original price and not the market price. Now, we have to bear in mind that those who make the irregularity are not the investors, and you only ask for the original price. But in fact, it should be market price, where the properties have actually risen in price by 10 to 15%. Why it should be reverted back to the original position? Because if we are to ask for a court order, it should be Section 213. That is restitution. That is to reinstate the position before the agreements were signed by the investors. That's why I said that has nothing to do with dropping or rising of prices. It's restitution. That is the requirement under Section 213. Next, Mr. Dennis Kwok. We can't hear you. Microphone not switched on. Can you speak louder? Can you try again? Can you try again? Mr. Kwok is in the last row. Mr. Dennis Kwok, perhaps I should speak louder. All right, it's okay now. Concerning the compensation for purchases of the Apex Horizon, amongst the 300-odd cases, 260 had been cancelled, but about 100 purchasers are not willing to accept Cheung Kong's compensation package because the compensation proposed could not compensate all that they had paid. Take, for example, the $10,000 of miscellaneous costs. Many purchasers spent more than that. The purchaser should not pay out of their pocket the outstanding amount. So Cheung Kong should compensate the purchasers in terms of all disbursements. That's reasonable. That is no conflict with Section 213. Secondly, for the solicitors representing Cheung Kong, have you read their letter issued on the 21st of June? I haven't read that personally, but I believe my colleagues have read it. Well, you should read it. Many purchasers do not understand or agree that why the solicitor's firm wrote that on the 21st of June that the agreement had been rescinded and discharged totally. Legally, that's totally incorrect because Cheung Kong has breached the agreement, not the purchasers, because Cheung Kong could not complete the transaction. So they cannot say that the agreement had been completely rescinded or discharged. I hope that the SFC can rectify Cheung Kong. That's number one. Secondly, if the purchasers are unwilling to accept Cheung Kong's proposed package, they're entitled to pursue their claims. That has nothing to do with Section 213. There's no conflict with Section 213 because purchasers have their rights. Why doesn't the SFC ask the Cheung Kong to compensate the purchasers for reasonable loss? The SFC does not want the small landlords to sue Cheung Kong. So I hope that you can make use of your power to force Cheung Kong to compensate the reasonable loss of the purchasers. Mrs. Lam, well, thank you, Madam Chairman. We are now working on the so-called cancellation of agreement and whether or not Cheung Kong has observed the procedures required. And we are obtaining information from third parties for assessment. First of all, what's the latest situation of cancellation? Secondly, concerning the requirements in the agreement, has Cheung Kong observed all of them and honored all of them? That is, has Hong Kong honored all terms of the agreements? As the case is still underway, investigation is still underway, therefore, excuse me for not being able to disclose any further information. Obviously, Hong Kong has not honored its obligation under the agreement because it's in breach of the agreement. That's why it should compensate the small landlords, and the SFC should ask Hong Kong to adhere to that fundamental principle. Would you please bring members' views back for consideration because it is under investigation? Mr. Kenneth Leung. Thank you, Chairman. The SFC and Hong Kong did seek legal advice outside. As for the definition of CIS, first of all, it's very blurred and vague. Will the SFC, in interpreting CIS, publish a set of guidelines? When will that be done? Another worry of mine is that for the definition of CIS, it is quite broad under the law. This incident leads to another issue. For family trust arrangements, when I read the definition, I think they should also be covered by the definition of CIS. So if there are over 10 members in a family and they collectively purchase a property for leasing, they will be covered by the definition of CIS. So in future, how will that be handled? Mrs. Lam, thank you. Concerning the definition of CIS, it existed even before the SFO was enacted. So the SFO has observed that definition. And during the scrutiny of the SFO, it was considered that the definition should be broad. And the definition has worked well in the past, so we had no intention to amend it. As to how we interpret the definition, we did publish guidelines. On our website, we have guidelines, FAQ, and all sorts of guidelines. The Honourable Member mentioned individual cases. Forgive me for not being able to comment on individual cases. Why? Because before we master all facts and information, we're not in a position to casually comment. Well, Chairman, I'm asking about this type of cases. Upon the completion of this incident, I hope that the SFC can guarantee to us that guidelines will be updated, and it should try as far as possible to answer the general questions from investors. Can that be done? Updating relevant guidelines. Well, in fact, our guidelines are updated every now and then, and we'll continue to do that. Next, Mr. James Yen. Madam Chairman, for CIS, if the SFC under the SFO considers a particular transaction to be problematic, how will compensation be handled? In particular, for investment products like the Apex Horizon, the property price plus fees and charges are included, will increased property prices, say 10 to 15% in this case, be also covered? Well, there may be a drop of 10 to 15% also. So I'd like to know more about compensation. Well, this is a crucial issue. If anybody breaches 103, then there has to be restitution. That is reinstatement. That is, you have to go back to the original position, that is before the contract was made. Deposits, etc., should be covered. As for fees and charges and disbursements, it depends on what they are. In this particular case, we ask that the contract be rescinded and we're looking at this continuously. Oh, sorry. The crucial issue is, now you mentioned lawyers' fees, brokers' fees, disbursements, etc., etc. All these have to be paid by Cheung Kong, compensated by Cheung Kong. But what about the property price? You mean the purchase price? Whether or not the property price has increased by $400,000 or decreased by $400,000, you will disregard that. Well, because the purchasers will claim that if they had used the money to buy another property, the investment would have grown in value. And of course, Cheung Kong may also say that if the property or the market price is to be considered, then Cheung Kong may not have to pay any compensation at all. So any stipulation about property price. Well, we act in accordance with the common law. Under the common law, if a contract is to be restituted, you have to go back to the original position. Oh, very simple. So original price is original price. 1 million is 1 million. Even if it drops by 10 to 15% under the common law, that will be disregarded, whether it is a decrease or an increase. No, we're talking about restitution. That is, you should treat the situation as you haven't signed the contract, so the deposit has to be paid. So it's original price, right? From that angle, can we understand the issue like that? No. Well, it's a simple question, but you give me a very confused answer. You say original price, so 1 million is 1 million, right? That's simple. So in this case, restitution is the original price. Oh, that means you haven't signed the contract. Then you won't say whether or not the property has risen or dropped in price. All right, that is disregarded. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Madam Chairman, Section 213 is clear. If you buy a property, only a deposit is paid. You don't pay the full price. That's why we mentioned the SFC. That is from the standpoint of Section 213. By restitution, you mean how much you've paid, say 50% or 10%, plus the disbursements. That's restitution. That's point number one. If there's any problem, under the SFO Section 108 or 277, the purchaser can ask for a compensation. That is how much he has lost in market terms. Well, don't mix up the provisions. The SFC should explain the case to members in that way. That will be clearer. Of course, Chairman, I'm not explaining this on behalf of the SFC. I'm just looking at this from a legal point of view. Another question is, SFC controls CIS, right? That is, the SFC is saying that there must be a point of control under the CIS. What about hotel operator? It is not an independent body. It's only an agent to control and manage. Control and manage are different. So the definition of control is very narrow.
I don't want to go into the specifics of Cheung Kong case. There is a DMC and SFC in the sale of hotel rooms. How do you explain that DMCs can be divided, but the SFC said that it is a CIS? So there is this is not clear, Mrs. Lam. There are 4 elements of a CIS. The major element, say for example in this case, is that the investor does not have day-to-day management and control over the property. Another element is that the property is managed by a third party. Arrangements are wholly managed by the person, and they include operation and management. with these elements, then it is a CIS. No, but what about the difference? Yes, I understand the 4 elements under CIS, but for the hotel operator, the controller of property and management of property are 2 different things. So what is the difference between DMC and CIS? There is a DMC in this property. So where are we and what's the difference? If it's just a DMC, then it's a very different case. If the management agent has the right to decide whether to lease it out, to whom, and for how much, and which unit, then it is beyond the DMC. Second round, 3 members. Any others? James To, Dennis Kwok, James Tien, and Abraham Sheck. 2 minutes. I'll draw a line here. Mr. To. The question of Mr. To is very simple. Cheung Kong has to abide by all the laws in Hong Kong, not just laws related to land, but legislations related to SFC as well. So, well, a DMC is in order when it comes to land issues, but the SFC says, the SFO says no. And if you insist on selling the properties, then you have to take the SFC to court. And you're saying of restitution to the situation before the contract. That means no loss is incurred. For a lot of people, well, the letter dated 13th of May, an offer of $10,000 and reimbursement of any legal expenses. So what $10,000 include all that? For the 6 law firms recommended by Cheung Kong, none of them would represent the sellers, the sellers, and they charge more than $10,000. What about agent fees and fees incurred in a mortgage application? We're talking about over 300 rooms. You think that no one have taken out a mortgage? You say that $10,000 would result in no loss. Have you done any studies? Mrs. Lam, our purpose is to restitute to the original state. A restitution is a restitution to the condition before the contract was signed. And according to the agreement, we require Cheung Kong to do a number of things: to rescind the agreement and to restitute the situation. Sorry, that's all I can say. Mr. To has given us some specifics, but that is what is said on the 19th of May. Then we are now looking at whether it's restituted. But that's what you said. You said you would agree if they do it this way. In a way, it is an agreement. Then how did you work out that $10,000? Why not $15,000? Is it because they tricked you, telling you that it's $10,000? So, any supplementary information about the setting of $10,000? In general, legal fees are around this amount, but I'd like to stress that we require restitution. So, $10,000, I did not read the letter, but you think that $10,000 was able to restitute the situation. We are now looking into how Cheung Kong does what they promised to do. Mr. Dennis Kwok. Well, I agree with Mr. To. You shouldn't ask the buyers to foot all the bills. Please follow this up with Cheung Kong. And when it comes to lots of bargain, yes, that is one of loss of bargain is also a form of compensation. I'm not talking about a difference in prices. I'm talking about losses they suffer in terms of disbursement. Buyers can ask for that from Cheung Kong. It's nothing to do with the price difference. A lot of buyers refuse the compensation package of Cheung Kong. If that is the case, how will SFC deal with it? How will you help buyers to see full restitution, or to enable buyers to get reasonable and full compensation from Cheung Kong? I asked the SFC to give us a supplementary paper as to how they follow up on the loss of buyers. Mrs. Lam, we're closely monitoring the progress. Please consider members' views. Mr. James Tian. I'm talking about the information in the paper, this CIS. I'd like to get more information from the chief executive. You say that if someone sets up a company, then he's the boss. Then if it involves the CIS, there will be many different shareholders. So you need someone to manage the investment. Well, we have a lot of joint ventures. So is it that we write shareholders agreement and that will be it? Are there guidelines that you find a partner? Is it the case that if there are over 50 of those, then it's CIS? Or 100? What about 4 or 5? Equally shared? Or some owns 40%, some others 1%. So is it CIS? Or if the shareholders agreement is signed, then it's not CIS. Chief Executive Officer, 103 refers to the fact that if it is a collective investment scheme and that is offered to the public, then prior authorization is required from the SFC. If the scheme, whether it's collective or not, is not offered to the public, then it doesn't fall under 103. If you want to offer it to the public, then it's under 103. Then you may apply to the SFC for authorization under 104. But as long as it's not offered to the public, then it doesn't fall under 103. What is meant by offer to the public? Well, what if I find 90? I find 90 per person and each paying $1. Then is it public? Well, that is a matter of fact, and the law is for the court to decide. Say, on the tram, I put up an advertisement. The tram goes all over Hong Kong Island. Then it is an advertisement to invite the public. It's an offer to the public. But what about through introduction of brokers? Through introduction of brokers, does it fall under 103? Well, that depends on the case. If the broker knows the few of you, and all along you've been making investments together, and then now there is a new investment opportunity, the broker mentions it to the few of you, then it may not be an offer to the public. But if you put up an advertisement in Hong Kong Economic Journal, SCMP, or you put up a banner at the Star Ferry, then it's an advertisement to the public. It's difficult to single out certain pieces of facts and then decide whether it is an offer to the public. Mr. Abraham Sheikh. I thank Mr. To that for pointing out that everyone in Hong Kong has to abide by the law. But my question is, what is DMC? What falls under CIS? If we buy a property, then it's under DMC. It's a strata title. You can't selectively criticize a case. Is this CIS? Or is this still just a property project? Please explain. So it's just for supplementary information, right? Mr. To? Sorry, can you extend it by 15 minutes? Because we're not in a hurry to hand over the venue. I will allow you to ask another question. I've already been very lax, because this item is for policy, and I understand that you are asking questions, and at the outset the Chief Executive Officer mentioned Apex Horizon. That's why I allow questions. Mr. To, this is related to policy because we're trying to find out what the policy is. 2 points. On the 19th of May, well actually 13th of May, at the end you said that the SFC wanted to use 213 to unwind the sale. You said the agreement with Cheung Kong will avoid an application under 213. But it's complicated. Because we're talking about, as Mr. Dennis Kwok said, there are over 100 buyers, and over 20 of them approached me. They would like to apply for an order to require Cheung Kong to execute the agreement. And if a court order is made, Cheung Kong will have to proceed with the agreement, and in this case they will not contravene laws related to CIS because that is a court order. But you may say, well, there are still 100 buyers who have not seen the sale unwound, so they would want to make an application to annul the agreement. But, well, for those who would like to buy, they would take Cheung Kong to court.
Whether or not you're to answer my question, I have to tell you the situation. When the purchasers ask for a court order, if you invoke Section 213, you'll actually be colluding with the business sector. You're actually helping Cheung Kong. I'm only sounding out an alarm as early as possible. Well, that's a hypothetical remark. I don't think I'm in a position to respond. Mr. Dennis Kwok, I'd like to comment on Mr. Abraham Sheikh's remarks. For property purchase, for normal properties, there won't be this CIS issue. For normal property units, they are undivided shares of a property. So there's no question of CIS. But now we're talking about a unit trust. It's something like a unit trust in this sale. So there is the CIS issue. For other properties, there won't be such an issue. I personally think that the definition is very clear. There is a reason for the law to be brought here because we have to treat different types of CIS, realty trust, etc., etc. Finally, I'd like to say that I really want the SFC to follow up on this case, such that the purchasers this time don't need to pay out of their own pockets their losses. That's very fundamental. Mr. Sheikh, Chairman, I'd like to thank Mr. Kwok for his explanation. I'm also very familiar with the law. Although I'm not a barrister, and I'm not viewing this from a barrister's point of view. For DMC, take for example, I can hire a management company to manage my properties. Let's not talk about this particular case. For REITs and unit trusts, they're different from DMC cases. DMC is about the power of control. So how should this fall into CIS or should it not fall into CIS? It depends on the DMC. If it is 100% control, I can still find a person to represent me to manage the property. He doesn't own my property, but I can give him the power of control. In that regard, I'd like to say that the SFC's power is very huge. Its power is huge. The law is so broad. I don't want these to trap everybody very readily. So I'm looking at this case from a market point of view, from an economic point of view. So we have to differentiate between the DMC and CIS. I'm familiar with CIS. I'm not familiar with others. I was given 4 years of training and struggle in the Lehman Brothers incident. So let's not allow these gray areas to let people fall into traps. SFC, any supplement? No. Now we've discussed in detail this issue. So let's conclude this item here. If there's no other business, business, meeting adjourned. Our next meeting has already been discussed earlier this morning, so please mark your diary. Next time we'll have a public hearing. It will be on the 16th of July, a Tuesday from 3 to 6:30 p.m. So Mr. Chung, would you please